You know, I never thought I'd see the day where I looked at a brand new Pokémon game, one that's supposed to be a mainline entry, a big leap forward, and just felt tired, not angry, not even disappointed in a loud way, just tired, like watching someone you've known for years keep making the same mistakes, and at some point, the frustration just melts into quiet disbelief. Pokémon Legends ZA feels like that moment. When I saw that trailer, I wanted to be excited. Legends was a name that once meant something. Legends Arceus wasn't perfect, but it was a step in the right direction. It showed Game Freak could break from their routine, that they could make something rough but refreshing. ZA was supposed to build on that, expand it, prove that Pokémon could still surprise us. Instead, it feels like they hit reverse. But before I dive into ZA itself, let's be honest about the broader context. Pokemon's been coasting for a while now. Sword and Shield were fine in the same way a microwaved meal is fine. It fills the void, but there's no flavour. Scarlet and Violet had ambition, but fell apart under the weight of their own jank. And now, ZA comes along, supposedly representing a fresh era, and instead it looks like a smaller, safer retread, a game that feels more like damage control than innovation. Let's start with what the game actually does right. Because there are things it gets right, and I want to be fair here. The world design, for one, is an improvement over Scarlet and Violet's empty plains. It feels denser. The cities feel like real places again, and the fact that it focuses on Lumiose City gives it a central personality the last few games lacked. Lumiose is iconic. Even if you didn't love X and Y, you remember it. So setting an entire game around that hub could have been brilliant. And to its credit, the art team tried. You can tell the environment designers have heart, the lighting is better, there's a sense of texture and depth the last few titles were missing. Even some of the new Pokémon designs are cool. I won't lie, there are a few that hit that nostalgic balance of simple but memorable. When Pokémon design clicks, it still clicks. That spark is still buried somewhere in Game Freak's DNA. But that's where the praise kind of stops, because once you actually look past the surface, once you start playing, thinking about the systems, the direction, the storytelling, it all unravels. The first issue is tone. Pokémon Legends can't decide what it wants to be. Is it a modern open-world adventure? Is it a nostalgic callback to X and Y? Is it a lore-heavy prequel in disguise? The game never commits. It plays like Game Freak threw 3 half-baked pitches into a blender and hoped the result would feel cohesive. It doesn't. It feels like a committee project, one that's afraid to upset anyone and ends up pleasing no one. Then there's the pacing. For a Legends title, ZA is strangely sluggish. Arceus had a rhythm. Go explore, capture, craft, return, repeat. It was simple, but addictive. ZA tries to reintroduce traditional Pokémon elements, like gyms and story quests, but instead of blending the two styles, they clash. It's like Game Freak couldn't decide if they wanted to double down on what worked in Arceus, or retreat back to the safety of old-school Pokémon. And as a result, they did neither. And the performance? Look, at this point it's almost cruel to bring it up, but it has to be said. The Switch is aging, sure, but that's not an excuse anymore. We've seen beautiful games on this hardware. Tears of the Kingdom proved it's possible. Xenoblade did it years ago. The hardware isn't the issue, it's Game Freak's engine, or maybe their priorities. Because once again, we're looking at pop-in, frame dips, and muddy textures. When a Pokémon game drops below 30 frames per second just from walking into a crowd, something's fundamentally wrong. And the thing is, people used to be willing to forgive some of that. If the gameplay loop was good, or the story was engaging, or the new creatures were interesting, people would look past technical flaws. But now it's been years of excuses. Every time Game Freak stumbles, we hear the same lines. Tight schedule, short dev cycle, limited team. And I get it, they're a relatively small studio for the scale of the brand they're carrying. But at some point, someone at the Pokémon company has to ask the obvious question, why keep doing it this way? It's like watching the world's biggest franchise operate with the mindset of a mid-sized indie studio that just happens to have billions in merch sales. And that disconnect is starting to catch up with them, not just creatively, but financially. The thing that really drives all this home isn't just the gameplay or the visuals or even the story, it's the reaction. You can feel the community shifting. When the trailer dropped, the hype was cautious. People weren't screaming in excitement. They were measuring expectations. Every new detail that came out was met with hesitation. Comments like, hopefully they fix it later, or maybe it'll run better at launch. That's not excitement. That's damage control before the game's even out. And it's wild because this is Pokémon, the single most bankable franchise on the planet, a brand that should be bulletproof. But when fans start treating new releases like potential disasters, you know something's broken in the relationship. I've been around long enough to see the Pokémon fandom go through cycles of anger and forgiveness. We've seen backlash before, Gen 5's art style, Gen 6's short post-game, Gen 7's cutscene overload. Every time people complain, then move on, then end up loving it in hindsight. But lately, the tone has changed. It's not temporary frustration anymore, it's exhaustion. People aren't saying, they'll fix it next time. They're saying, they won't fix it, and I just don't care anymore. And that's dangerous, not because the fans are being dramatic, but because indifference is the real killer. When your audience stops being angry and just starts checking out, that's when a brand starts to decay. What really surprises me is how Game Freak and the Pokémon company seem almost unaware of this shift. Or maybe they know and don't care, because the merchandise still sells, the anime still trends, and the mobile games still print money. But the core games are the heartbeat. They're what everything else orbits around. If people stop believing in those, the whole machine starts to lose its rhythm. Now, financially, Pokémon isn't collapsing anytime soon. It's too big, too interconnected, but you can see the warning signs. Each new mainline title sells slightly less than the one before. The legs on those sales are shorter, the buzz dies quicker, and that's a symptom of brand fatigue, when your releases become routine instead of events. For years, Pokémon has relied on what I call momentum marketing. Each generation keeps attention by sheer inertia. You announce new starters, new legendaries, and fans rush to speculate, to draw, to post theories. But if the games themselves stop being exciting, that momentum can't sustain forever. You can already see it in how the fandom behaves now. More and more people are turning to fan games and ROM hacks because those projects, ironically, feel more imaginative. It's wild that some unpaid hobbyists are making games with more risk and personality than one of the biggest IP in the world. And that loops back to Game Freak as a studio, because the Pokémon company's structure has basically put them in a creative straitjacket. They have to release on a schedule that fits the anime, the cards, and the merchandising calendar. The result is that they never get the time to refine ideas. Every game feels like a prototype for something that could have been great if they just had another year. When you look at other Nintendo franchises, Zelda, Mario, even Metroid, you can see how time and space let those teams breathe. Tears of the Kingdom took years, and it shows. Super Mario Odyssey felt alive because you could tell the devs played around with it. But Pokémon, it's locked in this relentless treadmill where every generation has to hit its mark, no matter the cost to quality. And I think Legends shows the long-term effects of that system. It's a game made by tired developers trying to reinvent a tired formula while the corporation above them refuses to slow down. It's the perfect storm of burnout. What's tragic is that Pokémon doesn't have to be like this. The blueprint for something special already exists. Arceus proved that. Fans loved its weirdness. It was rough, sure, but it had energy. It felt experimental, alive. It was the first time in years that I actually wanted to explore in a Pokémon game, instead of just progressing through it. And that's why ZA hits so hard, because it shows that spark fading again. Instead of pushing further, they pulled back. They took what worked and sanded off the edges, making it cleaner but duller. It's almost like Game Freak misread what fans liked about Arceus. They thought it was the open world that made it fun, or the ancient setting, or the Legends label. But what made it work was the freedom, the willingness to experiment, the sense that the devs were actually learning and growing. ZA feels like a company scared to take another risk, and that's what's worrying long term. Not just for this one game, but for Pokémon as a brand. Because creativity is renewable, but only if you feed it. You can't run on nostalgia forever. You can see this contrast clearly if you look at Beasts of Reincarnation. It's not a masterpiece, but it's creative in ways Pokémon hasn't been for years. It's experimental, strange, unpolished, and that's the point. It's Game Freak unchained. You can sense the developers having fun again. They're trying new mechanics, weird designs, odd pacing decisions. It's flawed, but alive. When I look at that, I can't help but think about what Pokémon could be if Game Freak had that same freedom. Imagine a Pokémon game built with the passion and curiosity that went into Beasts. Something where the devs weren't chasing deadlines or corporate synergy. Something where they were allowed to fail a little, to get messy, to surprise us again. Because Pokémon's best moments have always come from that mix of ambition and weirdness. Remember how wild the concept of breeding was back in Gold and Silver, or the first time you realised you could explore Kanto again after beating the Elite Four. Those were design risks. They didn't have to exist, but they did, because the developers cared about creating a sense of discovery. Nowadays, every new feature feels like a marketing bullet point. Terastallizing, Dynamaxing, Mega Evolutions. They're fine, but they feel like gimmicks. Like temporary systems designed to sell a trailer, not to build lasting depth. And that's part of why ZA feels so hollow. There's no sense of permanence. You can tell which features will be quietly abandoned next generation. You can feel the lack of commitment to long-term ideas. At some point, the franchise has to slow down, take a breath, focus on quality over quantity. Because Pokémon doesn't need constant reinvention. It needs refinement. It needs a sense of purpose again. The sad irony is that if Game Freak ever did take that risk, if they announced a longer development cycle or a creative reboot, fans would be thrilled, people would wait, they'd actually support that move. But that kind of long-term thinking doesn't fit the corporate model Pokémon's stuck in. That's the root problem. Game Freak has the creativity, the Pokémon company has the money, Nintendo has the brand power, but none of them are on the same page about what this series should be. And that disunity is what we're seeing play out now. Pokémon Legends ZA isn't just a disappointing game, it's a symptom. It's what happens when a series is trapped between creativity and commerce, when a developer with ideas is chained to a corporation that only sees release windows. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think Pokémon's doomed. It's too beloved, too deeply ingrained in pop culture, but I do think it's at a crossroads, because sooner or later, the nostalgia well runs dry. You can only sell the dream of adventure for so long before people notice the routine underneath it. The franchise needs a reawakening, and not a flashy reboot, but a philosophical one. It needs to remember why people fell in love with Pokémon in the first place. It wasn't because of perfect graphics or endless features, it was because of emotion, that sense of wonder, of companionship, of exploring a world that felt bigger than you. Legends has moments where it remembers that. There are little flashes, a quiet alley in Lumiose, a battle theme that hits just right, a bit of environmental storytelling that hints at something deeper. Those moments remind you that the soul of Pokémon isn't dead, just buried under the weight of corporate routine, and that's why I can't bring myself to hate the game. I'm frustrated, yeah, but I'm also sad, because I know the potential is there. You can see it in every uneven idea. You can tell someone wanted to make something great. They just didn't have the time, or the structure, or the freedom to do it. In a weird way, Beasts of Reincarnation gives me hope. It proves that when Game Freak steps outside the Pokémon bubble, they can still surprise us. They can still make something weird, unpredictable, and human. That spark is still alive in them somewhere. Maybe one day they'll bring that energy back to Pokémon. Maybe one day the Pokémon company will realise that slowing down is the smartest business move they could ever make, because quality sells, passion sells, and fans can tell the difference between something made with care and something made to meet a quarter. For now though, Pokémon Legends stands as a turning point, not because it's awful, but because it's hollow. It's the sound of a franchise losing touch with what made it magical. And if things don't change soon, the next Legends game might not have any legend left in it at all. Until then, all we can do is watch, and hope that somewhere inside Game Freak, the same people who gave us Arceus are still fighting to make something worth believing in again. But as long as we're in this down period of Pokémon's life, I don't see myself getting back into it. I give up on the Pokémon franchise. It hurts me to say it, but until the series starts pulling itself together, I believe my time is better spent playing other, more deeply enriching games. Thanks for watching my first ever video. I've never done anything like this before, so if you think my points were good, liking and subscribing will help out. Thanks guys, and I'll chat with you later.